we're having to shift our modality of learning. And this is just another example about how being flexible with the way that we process new concepts or how we engage with our learning opportunities is a success skill. So as you know, right now, we're also working on our student success essays, and there will be a video coming up almost immediately after this one is posted that will take a look at the progress I've made on my essay and talk about some of the methods you can use to also build your essays successfully. Before we get into that, let's talk about the next level of sentence structures. This is sentences level 4, that clauses, which clauses, and removable clauses. So the first on the list are that clauses. Now, that clauses are also called restrictive relative clauses. That's the grammar terminology for them. But they're another method that we can use to take an existing sentence formula and add extra information onto that clause. Now, you should note they can be added to any of our existing sentences. So let's take a look at how and why we use them. Okay, so they're used to tack on extra information to a complete clause. Just a reminder, complete clauses need to have a subject noun and a main verb. So they add information. Now, because they're restrictive, they're adding information that the writer is deeming to be essential. Therefore, once they're added on, they cannot easily be taken away. They become integrated into that sentence as a very important part of the data. So they often are used to define, to give more information about the clauses that they are supporting or coming after. They do not need a comma, and that reflects their relationship of being essential. So here's our formula. You have the clause that you're going to tell us more about, and then you add a that clause directly after. So no comma, and again, we can add them to any of our existing sentence formulas. So this is like an add-on. Let's look at some examples. Number 1, or example 1, we enjoyed the play that was held in the Port Theatre. So you'll notice the first part, we enjoyed the play. It's a complete idea, but we've decided that talking about where the play was held is really important to maybe to the rest of the paragraph. So we're using a that clause to add this restrictive information onto the initial sentence. Let's take a look at the second example. We believed that the cat would return. Now, this is a slightly different use, and this is actually the most common use that we can see for writers utilizing the that clause. Essentially, you have the subject and then the verb, and a that clause gets tacked on directly after the verb. And one difference between example 1 and example 2, if you look at example 1, you'll notice that the word that is playing the role of both the linking word, the joining word, the kind of the transitional word between the concepts, but it's also acting as the subject noun. So we can have a word that plays double duty here, double role. That was held in the Port Theatre. However, example number 2, that the cat would return. We have that. It's the relative clause marker here, but then we've got a unique subject here. The cat would return. Both of them are fine grammatically. All right. So as part of your free practice today, try writing and utilizing 3 sentences that incorporate that clauses. Second new version, which clauses. So they're also used to add extra information. However, they're called non-restrictive relative clauses, which can tell us the main difference here. They don't restrict the idea of the original sentence, therefore they are non-essential. So which clauses are another way to add details. And because they're different, they're non-restrictive and they're non-essential, we'll always use a comma to start, to head our which clauses. So the information they add is not essential to the sentence's core meaning. It's just extra. And we have our formula, C1, comma, and then our which clause. So these can also be used to add to all of our existing formulas. We like the car, comma, which was driving down 5th Street. So the author or the writer here has decided to give us extra information about the location of where the car was driving, but at the same time is also letting us know the more important point is that we like the car. Where it is not so crucial. How do we know? Because a which clause has been the chosen tool. Next one, example number 2. Old Mossy ransacked the camp, comma, which was built over the Salmon Creek. So again, we have this character attacking some sort of a camp, and there's additional information, but the author is deeming it to be a little bit less important. Moving on to our final new structure. Oh yes, I should mention, in your free practice today, please try to write 3 sentences that utilize which clauses to add extra information. Removables. So our removable phrases are the last of these tools we can utilize to add extra data into an existing clause. And the removable itself can be a word, it can be a combination of words or a phrase, or it can even be a full idea itself. Now the key point here is we're kind of parachuting them into an existing clause. That means we need commas on both sides. They can be removed. They don't change the data. They're extra. So yeah, this is the final way we can utilize to add extra information. They allow writers to define, to explain, or to elaborate. And since they're also non-essential, comma, semicolon, thus comma, they can be removed without damaging our core idea. Writers surround them with commas. Let's take a look at the examples here. The wrestler, comma, the huge man with black hair, comma, hung his head in shame. So we could pop it right out of there and our sentence would be perfectly fine. It totally makes sense, right? The wrestler hung his head in shame. So essentially we're adding the removable in there as a tool to give increased description before we get to the main point, which is that something bad happened and he's kind of downcast. Number 2, we wandered into the forest, comma, but, comma, turned around, comma, we could not find the path. So here's a second example. In example 1, you'll notice that we place our removable phrase between the subject noun and the main verb. This is the only way you can plug something in between the subject and its verb. And when you do it that way, it's always going to be a phrase that defines or explains the subject with more detail. Now, a second option is you can place it in the second clause of a compound sentence, and it goes between our linking word, the coordinate conjunction but, and the subject of clause 2. So take a look at both of those placements. I want you to try to replicate them in your free practice. Okay, this will be our first video. I'm trying to bang these out quickly because we're moving, we're adapting to the new learning need. We'll move on to the next video lesson immediately.